Hello, everybody, and welcome to this version of The Leading Issue, the CMI podcast on management and leadership issues that matter. I'm Francke, the Chief Executive of CMI, and today I'm thrilled to have as my guest one of the leading entrepreneurs of our time, a real trailblazer, Edwina Dunn. She was the CEO and co-founder of dunnhumby, where she pioneered the world's largest loyalty card, Tesco Clubcard. I'm sure we all know that one. And then in 2013, she launched the Female Lead, a nonprofit organization which sets out to provide alternative role models for women. And it's since been recognized as one of the top 5 initiatives for female empowerment globally. In 2019, Edwina deservedly got her OBE for services to data and business in the UK. And she's got a new book coming out soon. More on that shortly. Welcome, Edwina. Lovely to see you.
Thank you, Anne. It's a pleasure to be here with you again. It's always a joy.
Oh, well, that's very kind. Now, once again, I know we've spoken before, but for these listeners, we do need that whistle-stop tour of your career.
Yes, so I think I was an early data and technology geek. I joined an organization that effectively brought together what was the big data of its time, which was census statistics. And I started and learned my trade in that business. It was a big software house, a big American software house. It's where I met my partner. And by partner, I mean my business partner, who also became my husband. And we stayed there for nearly 10 years. And we hoped to develop and grow there, but it didn't quite work out for reasons I won't go into at this time. So we found ourselves kind of out of a job and worrying about a very big mortgage. And that's actually when we started dunnhumby. And then 5 years after starting that, into the door walked Tesco, and that was the beginning of this fabulous adventure we had with them, which then lasted a further 15 years with Tesco. Altogether, 20 years as dunnhumby, which then we sold to Tesco and retired, or we retired at least for a year.
Wow. Well, since then, you've been incredibly busy, and we'll come on to some of those things that you've been up to. But I can't emphasize how unusual it would have been as a woman to have a successful career at a time when the industry was not only in its nascency, but also very much male dominated. What were some of the challenges that you faced, and what did you do to overcome them?
You're right. And I think it's hard for people to relate to now. So much has changed. I think it's a bit like Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times and the worst of times. It was great because technology was just really coming into full power. So my career path pretty well mapped the growth of technology. But you're right, as a woman, you were kind of quite unusual in business to go into a world that was effectively retailing and then consumer products goods, which is essentially my world. It was very, very male dominated. The reason I think I survived and thrived indeed was for 2 reasons, probably one more importantly than the other. Number one, I had a business partner who was male and equal to me in every sense. And he basically did all the things that I couldn't do, and I did all the things that he couldn't do. So we had a fantastic partnership. And I'm a big fan of this concept of the power of 2. So I think that was reason one. We never went to meetings together, not often anyway. And we certainly didn't travel together because we had young children and we committed that one of us would be there. So I think that's reason one. I was kind of offset with a very male strong partner. But I think the second reason, and more importantly, is we were the only ones doing it. So there wasn't really any choice. So it was me or nobody. And I think I rather benefited from that.
Okay, well, that is the hallmark of a true pioneer. So being the first and foremost in your line of business certainly helped. But you went on then after dunnhumby to found the Female Lead, a movement dedicated to improving the visibility of female role models, perhaps informed by your own experience. And why do you think then that role modeling is so important?
Because I believe it's very hard, if not impossible, to be what you can't see. The visibility of successful women in all walks of career and in all ways of measuring success. So not just money and power, but influence and humanitarian effort. To see that, to understand the journeys that these women have been on, I think is so important. Boys will, what trips off the tongue of boys are their sports heroes a lot of the time. They will name them so eagerly and so easily. But you speak to girls, and normally the only women that they would talk about would be their mothers or their grandmothers. And so we wanted to make these more visible. And certainly that was the very beginning of the journey for the Female Lead. So role models, we think, are essential. And we know, because we run many campaigns on this, is that amazing things happen when girls meet their role models.
Yeah, and elaborate on that. Give us some examples of, what amazing things happen when girls meet their role models.
I think it's really very special when you put a camera on a young girl who's meeting someone that they would never normally have the chance to meet. The look in their eye, the realization that this is a person who is talking to them as an equal, and asking them, what do you want to be when you grow up? Why do you want to be that? The moment where there's a connection and they suddenly realize I can choose, and this famous person, for example, is telling me why not be that. There's a kind of spark that happens, which is just wonderful to see. We don't all get to see, the most famous person on the planet, but actually, someone who's been successful or got there and been there and done it, that is a role model. And many of us should realize that and step forward to be that role model.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very excellent point. And of course, you've done so much, and we'll come on to that, to highlight female role models. But what response do you get from men, for example, when you talk about role modeling women? And what do you think makes a successful male ally in this area?
I think we're at a difficult stage, if I'm really honest. I think there are some fantastic efforts. And I think, amongst, quite a number of men, there's a sort of sense of fair play that's very prevalent. But if I look at my career, I have to be a little bit cynical and say the biggest motivator for change is, especially in business, is if you're going to make a lot more money by that change. And the thing that I'm very focused on right now, and that I talk about in my book, and I know we're coming to that, but the thing that I talk about is women are this phenomenal force, which I don't think is recognized or appreciated right now, which is women decide most of the purchasing of every household in the world. So about 70% of all purchases, and therefore 70% of GDP, is decided by women.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk a lot about what women are not, and the fact that, you know, they do a lot of unpaid work, a lot of the caring work. They're not always rising to the top in business, but in determining how money is spent around the world, we are the leaders. And actually, the question I would ask is, why are men running all the companies and deciding what women want to buy?
An excellent question, which leads us on to your new book, and that is a staggering statistic. And I think the same is true for ultimately where the wealth of the world is going, right? More women having more of that wealth and then making those purchase decisions. The book is called When She's in the Room. Tell us a bit about it.
I brought a copy to hold up, and I thought I couldn't resist. Thank you.
We'll put a link absolutely in the bottom of the podcast so that people can order it. But yes, tell us about it.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk about this, I suppose, this hidden power that hasn't really been spoken of so much. And, you know, what amazed me, and you will relate to this, Anne, is that, you know, we have these concepts. We have the concept of the pink pound. We have the concept of the black pound, the grey pound, and even the purple pound. What is the currency of women? So I have called it the invisible pound, because at the moment it's not seen, it's not talked about, and it's not counted. But this invisible pound is very, very important. So, you know, what I'm talking about in the book is the fact that, you know, the work that I did with Tesco was a really simple idea made possible by technology. The simple idea was that all consumers are different. They want and need different things at different ages and life stages. So Tesco Clubcard segmented people by age, life stage, and what they put in their shopping basket, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I want to bring to influence change, particularly in the business world, is that, guess what? Women are very different. And at the moment, we tend to be described purely in age cohorts and whether we're married or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's too simplistic. It's too old-fashioned, because more and more women are in single households. They're getting married later in life. They're holding off having children. And 33% of households, women are breadwinners,
Mm-hmm.
which is extraordinary, really,
Mm-hmm.
when you think about it. So if we can bring new data, which is one of the things that I've done and talked about in the book, that the female lead has used its 8 million followers to invite women to tell us all about their life and what they need and want at different ages and life stages. That new data, I think, can help drive much better understanding of what women want, because, you know, we're not all the same at 40. Some are single, some are married, some have children, some are divorced. So there's a lot of change and nuance that leaders, businesses, and even governments are missing right now.
I'm sure you're right. Now, I'm going to come on to some of the stories of some of the many wonderful female leaders you spoke with in writing the book. But I'm intrigued about this data point, because you're absolutely right. That's your specialty.
Yeah.
You pioneered it. Give us an example, perhaps from the book, of one of the most surprising data differences that people might not recognize because they're lumping women all together by age or their marital status.
Well, for example, you could have women who are both the same age, let's say 35 to 40, and one might be single and very, very career orientated. What she buys, who she follows, where she goes on holiday, or where she lives is completely different to the woman who's become a mother, is worried about nurseries, about her salary, about how on earth she's going to budget for that family. And then that makes her own decisions, her own life choices, almost completely invisible. So woman one is all about me, who I am, what I stand for, some quality purchases, quality choices in life. Woman two, with family, children, has become almost invisible again. And it's all about, how am I going to look after the children? How am I going to feed them? How am I going to school them? And all the advice, you can imagine the financial advice, the health advice, radically different.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And, thinking about that statistic of the purchase decisions, now both of these women are making a lot of purchase decisions,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But their approach and who features in the decisions and the kind of decisions they make is going to be extremely different, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and what you're saying is we need to pay more attention to that. And certainly as part of the book, you interviewed a vast array of very different women, and I was struck by that list. And, we're talking Judy Murray, the mother of Andy,
Yes.
and an incredible sportswoman who's lobbied a lot for equality in sport. Christine Lagarde, one of the pioneers in the global financial sector, again, still a very male-dominated sector. Juliet Stevenson, the actress, three very different, or Vanessa, the new Vogue editor,
Vanessa Kingori, yes.
Kingori, just appointed the new Vogue editor. Perhaps she's a little bit more on the fashion choices. But what were some of the insights that you uncovered interviewing all these different, very accomplished women that maybe surprised you or delighted you?
I think what women have been very good at is presenting this very professional face in order to rise to the top of their world. They have to show that they are immensely capable, and that they have this kind of aura that people respect and respond to, which is, I am here, I am professional, I am in control. What you hear is the behind the scenes. It's almost like women are swan-like, with this is me floating on the water, and underneath you've got all the legs paddling like mad. And you hear that some of them are single mothers, some of them have been through breakups of relationships, marriages, who've had children with special needs, or have gone through some trauma or trolling and physical fear from some of their achievements, where they've been noticed and harassed. And I think you suddenly realize that there's no simple or smooth path to getting there. There's an awful lot of chaos and hardship. Hence, whenever anybody mentions the word role models and women, it's always about resilience, because you have to keep getting up and fighting anew. And I know you will know and understand that very well, Anne.
Oh, indeed. I've been through it myself, as most of us have. Well,
Yeah.
a corollary to this, before we come on to some of the other things you found in the book. So recently, as you know, the FTSE Women Leaders Review released their latest statistics. And yes, there's good progress for women on boards, slightly slower progress, but still a percentage point up on women on excos. But, you know, the real struggle seems to be women as CEOs. And we've had recently a couple of very high profile and extremely well covered departures where the women, very capable, competent women, have had some of that incredible scrutiny on social media and media generally. What's your view of that? Do you think that that's proportionate, or do you think, again, they're getting more than their fair share, perhaps because they're women?
I think they are getting more than their fair share, for sure. Do I have the evidence and the facts? Probably not, but I have no doubt that women are driven towards perfectionism because the forgiveness, it is just not there in the ranks around them. And so I do think it's quite tragic, some of the women we have lost who are phenomenally high achievers. And, you know, we all make mistakes, and for those to be unforgivable, and to take someone down from, you know, a really top-notch career, you know, it's pretty brutal, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you wonder, you know, men who've committed, perhaps made mistakes themselves, some of them perhaps even more grave than some of these other mistakes,
Yeah,
seem to still be there, popping up in yet another role, or
yeah,
not resigning, or, you
yeah.
know, people have shorter memories. And I've noticed this, and I do think perhaps it's still something we have to do some more work on.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if people saw that by losing a woman or women, that actually their balance sheet was going to be affected, or their share price, which ultimately is my ambition to prove that women want to buy from women. And if you lose them from powerful and top positions, women will say, well, I want to buy from a woman. So the organization that achieves that achieves a better balance, the 50-50 ratio in which we exist,
Mhm.
I think they're going to win. And I think this model of it's okay to have a spattering of women around, and it'll take as long as it will take, I think is going to mean that some organizations massively lose out on this new opportunity, which is, as you rightly said, you know, the wealth, not only the wealth spenders, but the controllers, but also the wealth gatherers.
Mhm.
Um, so it's a new opportunity and a new window, and we need women at the top. And I think men have to want women to be there, not because it's nice and fair, which is lovely,
Yeah.
but because they're going to make less money from it.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely right. The research does show that there are real business benefits to having this better balance throughout your organization. And yet, as you know, in our Everyone Economy research, we found what we call a say-do gap, right? Organizations
Yes.
claiming to be inclusive, but then when you really hold their feet to the fire and say, okay, you have that claim, what are you doing? You know, name some progress and some actual statistics and facts about what that program has achieved. They can't. So, right, 90% say they're inclusive, but less than 50% can prove it. You found something similar in your book, I know. Um, what advice do you have for organizations that want to turn the say into do, or even individuals in those organizations?
I mean, I really love this question, and it's so important. And I'm really committed. So I went to Davos for the second time this year. I kind of went on the cheap seats, but
Mhm.
I'm so glad I went because we had 28% women there this year. And it was a real pleasure to be part of that very energetic and charismatic group of people. And one of the things we talked about, and that I feel very committed towards, is actually capturing in data terms the say versus the do.
Mhm.
So this is exactly the output that I want to capture, that was triggered at Davos, and where we can find partner organizations to help us measure this so that we can actually I think celebrate is probably the best way of putting it, but celebrate the organizations that are already doing a great job, that are already doing what we hope them to be doing to make it a really more equal and a more navigable path for women. So watch this space, because it is one of my priorities for the female lead.
Well, that's amazing. And I'll, say that at CMI, we're keenly interested in all of that. And our Everyone
Yeah.
Economy work had something similar as a next step. So quite separately, we'll have another conversation about that, because
Yeah.
that's incredibly important. To make progress, you have to actually do what you say.
Yes.
That's
Yes. I
true in
love that
all
you're
endeavors.
No, I love that you're committed to this as well. It's very exciting. We
Yeah.
will definitely work out how to bring out the best in our focus and our collection of information. Very exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a super important point. So you also have some other very interesting concepts that I know you think are very important. One you alluded to when you told us about your career. You mentioned your partner. There were two of you, the power of two. And the other is the unentitled mentality. Tell us
Mm.
a little bit more about each of those.
Yeah. So the power of two is very simple concept, which is, sort of traditional wisdom is that you need one leader in total control that everybody listens to and follows. And that's been the model for quite a long time. That there is one CEO traditionally. Um, I found in my career and subsequently that putting together two people with opposite skills is not always the easiest thing to do, because they think differently, they want to do it differently, but at the end of the day, what you get is that one and one equaling three. I
Mhm.
truly believe, because the power of those two opposites helping to lead and direct, I think is phenomenal. So I am passionate that the power of two um, enables you to stretch further and do more. And in fact, with dunnhumby, when we were growing that business, we sent two people to 30 different countries to lead multi-million, even billion-pound, dollar, euro companies. And most of them were at most in their early 30s. So you can imagine, to just send one and say, you're in charge of everything and you're the expert, would not have worked. But we sent two of them, and you know what? They never failed. They were amazing. They propped each other up. They sweated and strived together, and they were amazing. So I'm really passionate about the power of two. So that's
Mhm.
the first one you asked me about.
Yeah.
To contrast that, we have this rather unfortunate, I suppose, condition, we can call it. We work with the fabulous Dr. Terry Apter, who's an author and psychologist. And we found that women are so grateful to be given flexibility, um, including to a large extent hybrid working. But before that, just flexibility around when they have a family, when they're caring for parents, that yes, you can leave a little bit early or you can arrive a little bit late, that this kind of drives this unentitled mindset, which is, well, I'm already getting this as a favor. Therefore, perhaps I shouldn't ask about promotion or salary increases. And maybe I should just be grateful for that flexibility that I've been given. So this is a very real condition that women have. Tends to be women far, far more than men, which is, I'm grateful to be given this, therefore I won't ask for more. And unfortunately, I think it just exacerbates the gap, which is the equality gap, the money gap, the gender gap.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, and you're absolutely right. So many women, when they have that flexibility, treasure it, right? And we know from our research, flexibility beats salary in every survey we do, right? People, and it doesn't matter what their age is, it doesn't matter their sex. People want to fit their work more around their life, and that's very important to them. It always comes out as the number one benefit. I find it a little bit odd that employers, therefore, when we see this in the media as well, there's a certain type of CEO, and typically it's a male CEO, standing up and saying, everybody, I want you back in the office 5 days a week, all day, every day. I'm going to monitor your swipe card. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, part of the challenge with hybrid working is who pulls it all together. Everybody's out there doing their individual work, but, gone are the times when we used to look over each other's shoulder and say, what are you doing? Oh, that's interesting. Maybe we could do this. And I think it's tough on people who are learning in their careers. And, it is tough when you're trying to run really complicated projects and everybody's working with their own rhythm, at their own speed and in their own way. So I think it's a very big challenge that isn't terribly easy to solve. I think making everybody come into the office at the same time or on the same day is probably wishing for something that's gone and past. And so I think we do need new models and new ways of working that kind of take the best, but also, I suppose, encourage people to realize that you can't just do your own thing. At some stage, there has to be a meeting of the minds and the capabilities. I haven't solved it. I don't know whether you have, but I don't think we're there yet. And I think we are in for a bit more strife from trying to resolve it.
Yeah, we're learning, we don't know, but we're learning and we're evolving. And I think what we find is that leaders that listen, leaders that talk to the various people in the organization and ask, how can we make this work for you? How can I make it work for you? And how can we make it work for your team on this particular project? Having that discussion at the outset is something that we really need to do more of. But on the other hand, maybe what we need to get away from, and this was interesting at this event yesterday, I was at a male CEO that took over an all-male exco and now has a 50-50 exco. When asked what was one of his fundamental principles, he said flexible working. And he said, but then all my executives say, okay, flexible working, what are the rules? And he says, well, this is the point. It's flexible, so there are no rules. It's about listening to what works for you and having those conversations. And we think that good management and leadership increasingly is about having those conversations and discovering. And as you say, then also people feeling that they are entitled to that flexibility, but they're also entitled to advance and have promotions and ask for more money.
Exactly so. Exactly so.
Yeah. So anyway, you are a pioneer in data, a STEM career, so many technical professions, whether it's data or technology or indeed engineering, have even less progress than some other sectors for women and other marginalized, well, women are not a minority, but other marginalized groups. What would you like to see organizations do to move the dial here?
Well, I think without it being the fault of schools, because I think teachers and educators are amazing. I'm a super fan of the hard work that they do. Part of the problem is schools are rewarded for grades.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we have to do is consider that businesses would not have one KPI, grades. They would have at least two, which would be grades and subjects. And I think what we need to recognize is some subjects are more valuable to industries that are now and coming up in the future than others. And it may be that maths is super important. And so I think what we've got to figure out is why schools may tilt someone towards a subject where they're more likely to get a higher grade than maybe a subject that is going to find a higher paid job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that needs to be thought about, because there's no question. I mean, girls are amazingly actually better at subjects like maths and physics than boys at the same age, but they are constantly persuaded, I'm not saying just by schools, but by their peers, that those aren't the subjects they should do, which I think is tragic because they're really, really good at them. dunnhumby, if we go back to the power of two, dunnhumby, one male, one female. Do you know what? In the pioneering days of data and technology, we were 50-50 men and women.
That's amazing. And obviously you were incredibly prosperous, so it obviously worked for you. But it is very true what you say about schools inadvertently perhaps, and parents and peers need to shift the dial, because when you talk about, when you go into schools and you say, tell me what an astronaut looks like or an engineer looks like, right? They draw, they draw a man, tell me what a nurse looks like, a teacher looks like, right?
Yes.
They draw a woman, and it's down at that level that we really need to say, no. Actually, you can have a male primary school teacher, and in fact, we should have more of them. And you can have a female engineer or astronaut, right? So it's breaking down those stereotypes, and not just in schools, but in society generally. And I think you're obviously somebody who's done that extremely successfully. So I'm sure you do a lot of this, but a lot of schools should be looking to you and your new book and the female lead to help create these role models. I know education's incredibly important for you. Now, we ask all our guests here at The Leading Issue, if you were in charge for the next 12 months, what's the one issue or challenge you would really focus on?
Well, I don't think my answer is going to be very original, but I would say we need to sort out childcare.
Mm-hmm.
Childcare, taxation provision, tax offset, encouraging, making it more attractive for companies to provide extra support around childcare. The way legislation's been created, it is highly punitive. And even worse, actually, what we know now is that women are rather unfortunately deciding to go back to work and actually paying the childcare out of their salaries personally, which means you're kind of punishing yourself to go back to work by spending 3/4 of it on childcare, personally, not as a family, but personally. So I sort of feel we need to work out some kind of dual taxation, just like you would share in other aspects of marriage. Is that, you know, if you have children with a partner, the cost should be shared, and
Absolutely.
tax should be shared, and we should incentivize what are two people working in a household, because if we don't, no one is going to be able to afford to live anywhere, you know, accommodation, buying a flat, renting a flat even, but buying a flat, buying a house, we have to get that cycle right. So yes, if I ruled the world, which I don't, but if I did, that is what I'd sort out first.
Well, I think that's a great answer. And it is an original answer. Nobody said that before, but I think it's incredibly important. And there's so many examples. I heard this concept of normalizing male parental leave. First of all, paying men and women equally to take parental leave. And secondly, making it normal for men to do so, right? And this concept of loud parenting, being a man and saying, I'm off to the school play, I'm taking parental leave, you should too. Or, you know, compressed work hours and then putting in your email, I'm golfing today with my kids, or taking them swimming. All of that, making it normal, I think is so important. And the other thing you mentioned is the cost. This country has such expensive childcare.
We do.
Yeah, especially in places like London, people cannot afford it. So,
and we're not even getting the trained staff through, are we? There's a shortage, so it's not good.
No, and so it's a very important thing to focus on. I have no doubt, Edwina, that if you were in charge, you'd fix it. That's your track record. You'd use the data, you'd find out what the problems were, and you'd segment it and come up with the action plan to close the gap.
Thank you for your faith in me. I tell you what, I would relish that challenge.
Well, that's great. Well, when she's in the room, hold it up again for us. It's out soon. We'll put a link so you
tomorrow. It's tomorrow. Yeah.
Tomorrow. Wow. Okay, we'll make sure we include that link. Congratulations again. Lovely to speak to you as ever. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. If you've listened to this and enjoyed it, do find out more about joining CMI. You can do that in the link. Thank you.
Thank you.